All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to get started just in a second. Let a couple people filter in here. I see you guys jumping on in. Thanks for joining. We have Ben Pearce here. We're super excited. I'm going to give people just a couple more seconds. And then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, we got a good amount of people in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sammy Focarino. I'm the Senior Events Manager here at Consensus. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. This webinar is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com. We had a great time at our events this year so far. If you joined us for any of those, thank you so much. DemoFest X West Coast was in San Francisco in March, and we had our biggest virtual event, DemoFest, in May. We're very excited to be working towards our next events later this year in Dublin, London, and New York City. You can register for any of these events at demofest.com, which I will also post in the chat right now. All right, just a couple housekeeping items super quick. We encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Our speaker will answer questions throughout the session, so you're welcome to post your questions at any time through the Q&A box. Make sure you post those questions through Q&A and not chat. We don't want to lose any of your questions, so make sure you get those in the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to answer as many as we can. If at any times you're having technical difficulties, go ahead and press the help button on the right side of your screen. And now I would like to introduce our speaker. Ben Pearce is a coach, trainer, keynote speaker, creator, and founder of Elevated You. He spent 20 years at Microsoft, 10 years as a deep technical consultant, and 10 years leading high-performing teams. He's a regular voice in the community, contributes a bucket load of great content, and created the popular technical storytelling course and community. And with that, I am going to turn the rest of the time over to you, Ben.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here today. Thank you for that lovely intro. And can you see my slides, Sammy? Is everything started sharing all okay?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that lovely intro and welcome to everybody. It's lovely to have you all here. So as Sammy said, my name's Ben Pearce and I'm the founder of Elevated You. I spent about 20 years at Microsoft. 10 of those years in deep tech roles with a good bit of pre-sales involved, and then 10 years leading teams, including pre-sales teams. And that was from both a professional services perspective, but also a product perspective. And I spent a lot of time delivering on stage, delivering in boardrooms, delivering on video to customers, and learned a lot along the way. And so I founded Elevated You to help enable people working in the tech world to develop their professional skills or their soft skills. And so today we'll be thinking about maybe moving from taking a shot in the dark with your comms, which is what that photo there is all about, to being really relevant, really clear, and really memorable with your audience. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So whenever I start to think about technical storytelling, my mind, of course, goes to Freddy Krueger. Right. So picture this, if you will. Can you imagine sitting down to tell maybe your daughter or a 5-year-old girl, some of you have probably got kids, a bedtime story? And can you imagine it being Freddy Krueger? You know, and you read something like this. Freddy's skin was puckered, knotted and gnarled, still recovering from where he'd been burnt alive. The deadly sharp knives on each of his fingers were poised, ready to murder her in her dreams. Can you imagine that? Well, I hope not many people on the call would do that. Why? Well, it's inappropriate for the audience, and so it would lead to a negative response. So if we start to take that to the tech world, we need to think about telling appropriate stories, not telling inappropriate stories to our audience. Not inappropriate as in a HR violation type of inappropriate, but inappropriate as in not relevant, inappropriate as in not valuable, inappropriate in that it means it's going to have less impact or less influence. But it's really tough, right? Because we've got technical decision makers, business decision makers, engineers, end users, to name but a few of the people we need to influence. So today, I want to talk about technical storytelling, which helps you be appropriate to your audience. So why technical storytelling? And let me dig into, I guess, what I call technical storytelling. Well, for me, it's going to help you become more influential. Not as in an Instagram star getting free ice creams and free sunglasses, but more about being influential because people listen to you. Being influential because people have confidence in your position and confidence in the advice that you're giving. And influential in that people are prepared to act on the things that you've said. And I think technical storytelling helps you become more memorable. And being memorable is really important, right? And I'm not saying you need to stick a toothpick with an olive through your tongue in your next architectural meeting, but it's about people remembering you and remembering your message. It's about people not instantly forgetting you and instantly forgetting the things you've said, about people taking your message to heart and wanting to do something with it. And it allows you to stand out from the crowd. And I think if you put those together, ultimately, it leads to you being successful. Whether that's people choosing your design, whether that's people choosing your product, whether that's people investing time in learning the technology that you're passionate about, whatever it might be, if you put those together, you're ultimately going to be more successful with your customers. So that's why I love to talk about technical storytelling. Now, today, I'm going to break this into two main chunks that we're going to talk about. The first chunk, I'll introduce a framework called Oren. And second chunk, I'm going to talk about something called the split brain problem. I'm really thinking about more visual storytelling and visual communication. So that's how I'm going to break it up. And after each of those sessions, I'm going to do a bit of a Q&A. So if you've got any questions as we're going through this, as Sammy said, stick them in the Q&A manager, not the chat, and then we'll go to Sammy and get some of those questions at various points. So please do just pop those in the chat. Not the chat, pop those in the Q&A. Right, so let me introduce Oren to you. So this is a framework that I use all the time. Whether I'm about to do a 30-second elevator pitch, whether I'm about to get on on stage at a big tech conference, or whether I'm about to give a webinar to a load of people with consensus, this is the framework, my go-to framework, and it's a mnemonic. So maybe it's a bit of a hard word to remember. Maybe think of some elven king, from the Tolkien world or something like that. Oren. It stands for something. What it stands for is audience, objective, remembered, emotion, and next steps. So whenever I'm planning a presentation, conference, storytelling, whatever you want to call it, this is what I start off with. I get that in my mind, and then I've got a little template and I fill it out. And so what I'm going to share with you is what each of these mean and what I mean by all of these different parts. So let's start with audience. So put it to you. One of the foundational concepts about talking to audiences, talking to people, is that the audience is the center of the presentation, not you. And I think a lot of people think, when they get on a stage, when they're there to talk, that it's about me. It's about me, enlightening the world. It's about me selling my product. It's about me. It's about my message. But I put it to you, that's the wrong way to think about it. Actually, the audience is the center, and they are giving their non-refundable time to you. Whether they're Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, any of the richest people in the world, none of them can buy back time. And so the audience, you can't buy back the time that you're spending with me, right? So my job is to put you at the center and to hopefully give you value. So that's the first assumption when you need to think about your audience. And therefore, you need to know your audience. Who is it you're talking to? So like now, I'm talking to primarily a pre-sales community. When I'm maybe doing a sales pitch, I might have some technical decision makers. I might have some engineers. Have I got a CEO? Have I got a CFO? You know, who are the people that I've got in the room with me? And I need to know my audience, because if I know my audience and I know what's important to them and I can build empathy with them, then I can give them value and I can be relevant. So the audience are at the center. I've got to know who they are and maybe what's important to them. And now I can be relevant in my messaging and use clarity in my messaging, which means that they're ultimately going to get value from this. And if the value's there, then the audience is going to be happy. So whenever I'm giving a presentation, I think Oren, I think who's going to be in my audience and how do I give value to that audience? So I go in and I fill in my little template. Audience, who's going to be there? I then start to think about the objective. But I think about this in two ways. I think about it, firstly, from the audience's perspective, and secondly, from my perspective as the presenter. Quite often we just think about it from our perspective, you know. So I turn up and my perspective is that I want to sell this product. I want to build this relationship with this person. I want to influence this person in whatever way. Those are all very important, all very important things. And it's good to have clarity of those. And again, write them down. What is your objective from this communication, from this storytelling session, from this presentation you're going to be doing? And write it down. Is it to build a relationship? Is it to sell something? What is it you're trying to do and trying to achieve? But also, you really need to flip that round and say, what is the objective of the people in the audience? And what is it that they want to get from it? What's the problem that they need to solve? What's the opportunity that's there for them? What level of technical depth is helpful for them in making decisions or understanding what's going on? And so write down what your objective is. So you've got clarity about what you're trying to achieve. And then write down, what is your audience trying to achieve? Again, so as you've got clarity. So then as we start to make decisions as to what content we're going to put in our story, what's not going to go in there, we've got that written down like a guiding light that we can continue to use. So we thought about the audience. We've thought about the objective. Next thing is, what do you want them to remember? I can't tell you how many sessions, presentations I've been in where the presenter, it's like they've seen me as a wall and they've just thrown mud at me. You know, it's like they're scooping up mud and just throwing it at the wall. And that mud kind of represents knowledge and they're just peppering me. And some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. And the bit that sticks, the bit I remember, is some bit that actually wasn't very important. And this bit that wasn't very important. And the thing that they really wanted me to remember, I haven't remembered because it was hidden amongst all of that other stuff. Okay. So it's really important that you have clarity in your mind. What is it that you want people to remember from the things that you're saying? So I think about it like this, you know, so what do you want your audience to remember? The first bit in the center there is, what is your key message? So what is the thing that you can write down in a sentence that is the thing you want them to remember? Because if you can't do it, if you can't write it down, then how the heck are the people that you're talking to going to remember it and be able to write it down? Okay, so you need your key message, which is the root of everything. And then I'd suggest to you, in an ideal world, you probably want 3 themes that then support that. You know, it doesn't have to be 3, could be 2, could be 4. 3 is the best in my experience, if you can. 3 sub-themes that support that key message and point to that key message and really help provide some substance to what it is that you want to say. So if I think about it from this talk, because of course I'm sort of having to live this, it's a bit weird. I'm sort of having to live this as I'm talking to you, you know. So my key message as I think about this is that being relevant, clear, and memorable is vital for your success. So I guess that's the key message that I'm trying to get to you. And I've got 3 sub themes there. That Oren helps you achieve that. That the split brain problem, which I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, helps you achieve that. And that technical storytelling, in more depth, helps you achieve that. So they're the 3 things that I'm going to provide substance to the key message, that being relevant, clear, and memorable is vital for your success. So let's go back to Oren. Audience, objective, what you want them to remember. And again, we write all of these down. What are the things that I want them to remember? What are my key supporting themes? Next one, emotion. Probably most of the people in your audience are human. There might be the odd guide dog. There might be an AI or 2 now. But probably most of the people in your audience are going to be human. And the humans tend to have emotions, feelings. And I think we often forget about that in tech. We often think about things a bit logically. We often think, about things a bit technically. And actually, we forget that the people we're talking to are indeed people. And there's this great quote from Maya Angelou. And it says, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. Well, how do you want your audience to feel when you're talking to them? So some bad examples I've seen: bored, bewildered, overwhelmed. Are those the sort of things that you're going for? Because I've seen a lot of people achieve these sorts of things. Maybe we're thinking, I want them to be inspired. I want them to be relieved that I'm there to solve this problem for them. I want to be confident that they're there, that there's a good future for them. Maybe I want them to be angry at the beginning about the size of the problem and the fact that they need to do something. What is it that you want to make them feel? And think about how we're going to put that into the story that we're going to tell, or into the presentation that we're going to give. So I write that down. So I write down who's in my audience. I write down what's the objective. I write down what do I want them to remember. I write down how is it I want them to feel. The final bit then is next steps. So what is my strategy for next steps? Now, I know I'm speaking to a lot of people from the pre-sales world here. And so I know a lot of you will be thinking about this, about your sales cycle. We'll be thinking, I'm in to do this bit, and we know what's coming next. We know what's happened before, and we've got a strategy. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But what you want to do is be intentional on what you want your audience to do next. Don't fall into the trap of, can you send me your slides later? Right? Because PowerPoint was not designed as my follow-up strategy. Sending somebody a 50 megabyte file full of pictures of footprints in the sand should not be my strategy for what happens next. And yet, interesting, one of the things Sammy asked me when we're talking is, are you happy to share your slides? And my answer was no, just because that's not the best way for me to follow up. I need a better strategy from that to follow up after this. And so you don't want sending a massive file to be your strategy of next steps. The presentation that you're going to deliver is only ever part of the journey with the customer. What's your next steps strategy? Is that going to be that you've got some follow-up articles and blogs? Some demo videos? Have you got some white papers, communities that you want them to join, webinars you want them to attend, ebooks they should read, places to chat with you? Slides are not the answer. And there's a great quote from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Some of you might have read the book or been on courses. And one of those is begin with the end in mind. So what is it that we want to achieve? And now let's work back from that as to what's going to be in the presentation. So we need to think about our next steps strategy. I'm going to pause there and I'm going to hand over to Sammy. Sammy, have we got any questions about Oren at all?
All right, let's see. We do have one. So when you build this out, do you start at the top, the audience? Wouldn't you want to start your presentation design at the objective? So I guess they're asking about like flow.
Yeah, what way? Great question. Great question. So the first thing I'd say is this is iterative, right? So I put down what I can and I'm going to iterate on that. So, quite often what might happen is somebody comes to you and says, hey, Ben, can you talk to customer X about this sort of thing? And it might be the product that I'm a specialist in. It might be whatever it is. And so we start off there. And so literally I'll then start going, okay, right. What do we know about the customer? Who's the audience? And they go, oh, right, the audience is going to be a group of solution architects for the customer. So you get that information and then you can start to think, right, what's going to be important to them? And they might have given you an objective, well, what is the objective from our perspective? And the objective is, well, I want you to basically sell this product to them. I want you to make them feel that they need this in their life. So you've already got a bit there. So you might start with those bits, but then you might go, well, what do I want them to remember? And actually, at that point, I go, I don't know. What I need to now do is a load of brainstorming. What I've then subsequently found out is that this customer is in the renewable energy sector or they're in the pharma sector. And therefore, I need to think about what do solution architects in the renewable energy sector care about. And so I might iterate on that and get some more detail on what the audience is. So what I do is I write that Oren framework and I put as much in as I can. And then as I'm creating, I keep updating that so that I can continue to use that as a reference as I build out more content and maybe choose which anecdotes I'm going to use, which customer examples I'm going to use, which demos I want to do. I can build off of that and iterate on that Oren framework.
All right, we did have a couple other questions come through here. So let's see if we can go through these. If you want to keep going, we can do that. And then we can always save these for the end if we have time. But
yeah,
is there a template for this flow?
There is a template for this flow. I could probably write it down for you. It was really easy to do the template. I wrote down those words, audience objective, or remembered, energy, next steps, and put space for a couple of bullet points underneath each one. So that's all the template needs to be. I do have one. If you really want it, I can send it you in a doc file, but it's that simple. Just the title and some space to write some stuff.
All right. Can you show an example of what a Oren presentation looks like?
Well, this is an example of one that I'm giving you today. So I'm trying to live and breathe what I'm doing. Have I got an example? I haven't got it right to hand now. So perhaps whoever wants that, message me after on LinkedIn and I can share that. I have got some examples where I've used it. And this presentation is hopefully an example of it living and breathing.
Awesome. All right. If a client asks for slides as follow-up, how do we address that if our goal is to not give them the slides, besides inviting them to a webinar, suggesting another meeting to go to over the info again?
Great question. So this then comes into what's your strategy, right? Because, the customer isn't asking for your slides because they're a collector of slides, because they're like, I love a good slide deck. I only like .ppt files. What they actually want is a reusable version of that content that you've got. So what you need to do is share that reusable version of the content that you've got. So for example, my next steps, and that I'm going to be sharing with you at the end, I've got them here actually, as we were talking about next steps. So I've got a podcast. And so for me, rather than get the slides, I'd love you to go, there's some more in-depth conversations about these type of topics, and I'd love to point you there. So that's one of the things. Next thing I've got is I've got a website, and on there I've got some very specific landing pages that talk about the things that we're talking about now. And I try and make that as accessible as possible, you know, with a QR code, so you can just get your phone up and get to that bit of the website. And then for me, LinkedIn, you know, I use LinkedIn a lot. And so in there, I've used my profile and my feature. So if you go in to look at my profile, the first thing that comes up, in fact, is Oren. So if you forget what Oren stands for, and you've got me on LinkedIn, that very first thing is effectively, you know, the same as the slide deck, but it's in a more web consumable set of content that's available. So customers don't want slides. Customers want to get your content. So put it where you want them to take it, not in an 80 megabyte PowerPoint file. I'm going to pause from questions there, if that's all right, Sammy. And
Yeah,
I'll
that
come
totally
back,
works.
and I'll come back. I want to talk about the split brain. I'll talk about that. And then we'll come back and we'll maybe go through some split brain questions after that. And then we'll wrap up with any more Q&A that we want to go through. So you've got your template, you've got your framework of what it is that you're going to deliver. I want to talk about the visual side, and I want to introduce the split brain problem. So I'm going to continue with the horror theme from Freddy Krueger earlier. You know, the split brain problem, and watch this animation, is this. Oh, a knife through a brain. Oh, terrible. But it's a major challenge in the IT. And it's the idea that you split the audience's attention between the visual aids and what you say. And I see this all the time, you know, literally all the time. And so actually the visual aids, they're not aids anymore. They're visual distractions. And actually the impact of these is that they're reducing the understanding of the audience, that they are reducing the engagement with the audience, and they're reducing your memorability. So I'm going to talk about how we can avoid that. And I see it mainly in two areas in the tech world. The first one is really wordy slides. And the second one is really complex diagrams. And so I'm going to think about maybe some techniques that we can use to help you with your visual storytelling, and how you help have impact on people with, you know, the slides that you're using. So let's start with wordy slides. Okay. And I'm going to start with a little experiment. Okay. What I'm going to do now is share with you something that is so important about the split brain problem. Okay. This is the most important thing that I'm going to tell you. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to turn off the slide. I don't know if we've got reactions in Zoom at the moment, but let's see if we have. If we have, put your hand up, or make some kind of emoticon if there are any and they're enabled. If you read anything on that slide whilst I was talking to you. Let me have a slurp of tea. Well, if anybody's able to react, they can react. I'm seeing nothing coming through, so I'm assuming that that's turned off at the moment. The point being,
we're getting a couple in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat function.
Okay, we are.
And we also have a couple people who have raised their hands. We have 13 people raise their hand. We got a couple coming through the chat. So you're getting some feedback.
We are getting some feedback, and people did. Well, I mean, it was a bit of a lame experiment, let's be honest. But I was trying to tee up with my voice that I was going to give you the most important part of this session. And at the same time, I put on some slides, and I reckon probably everybody started reading those slides. And I reckon that reduced the attention that people were focusing on the message that I was giving. Let me put the slide back on, right? Because this isn't, you know, I've seen a lot worse slides than this in the tech world. Let me let you have a little read, because it's quite interesting. And probably some of you are thinking, oh, I want to read that. You know, what this is a slide all about cybersecurity. I've got some random, you know, numbers that makes it look like it's technical, you know, lots of data. And then I've got in there some quite interesting points. Hacking's on the rise. Cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of customer networks. Business suffered 50% more cyber attacks. Teenage hackers are costing us millions. And then data breaches caused by negligence may lead to jail time for corporate executives under legislation introduced last week in the US. So that's all really interesting. But the point is, people start reading that. So I might be trying to talk about, let's say, one of those first 2 points, that company networks. I want to talk about security and company networks. But the problem is, because I put all that information up, somebody else is reading about jail time for corporate executives. And that's taken their train of thought off somewhere completely different. And now they're not really listening to what I'm saying. So I'll put it to you that actually those points there are your notes. And that's my notes that I've shared with you there. And I don't want to do that. So let me give you perhaps a better example that you could use. And before I show it, I do just want to say, I'm not a designer. I'm not a graphic designer in any way. I'm rubbish at this stuff. But it's not that hard. So this is maybe how I might choose or the visual aid I might choose as I was talking through this. So I love this picture. You've got somebody in a hood, they're always a criminal. That seems to be what happens in photography or films or whatever. And I love the fact that they're breaking the rules. They're sat on the edge of the building, just nonchalantly hanging their feet over the edge. It feels like the world is their oyster. And then if you put that with that bit of text there, cyber criminals can penetrate 93% of company networks. You've got this feeling, that there's all these offices that you can see in the horizon there, and he can do whatever he wants in any of them. And I love the way the picture sort of tells that story. But that's just a free picture, right? That I've just gone and searched for, I think, on Unsplash for that one. So that's a royalty-free picture. I've just slapped that on. Then all I've done is taken a little square box, put a little bit of transparency on it, and put some text in. It's literally it. That's not really much designing. And then I would change those text boxes, to those bullet points that we had. So maybe I'm going to now talk about networks, and then maybe I could slide that box off to the left and pop on another one that had now got the next data point about teenage hackers or whatever it was, or jail time. But the point is, it's backing up what the narrative is and focusing the brain, as opposed to splitting the brain onto 2 separate streams of information. So you want this cohesive approach to your slides. So that's all very well and good for maybe wordy slides. We take the words and we put them in our notes, and I'm using notes now. A lot of people say notes are really bad. I got loads of notes in front of me now to help me keep concise, to help me keep punchy, to help me keep on message. So we take those, we pop those in our notes. We're going to use our notes. The slides are not our notes. The slides are our visual aids. But let's talk about complex diagrams, because this is the other place where I see the split brain problem manifest itself. So just imagine, we've had a slide that maybe looks a bit like this one, looks cool, we've been talking perhaps at a higher level, but now we want to start to change gear and we want to start to get into something that's a bit more complicated. The last pre-sales leadership job I had was with Azure, hundreds and hundreds of services, really complicated platform. So we were trying to sell stuff that was really quite complicated. It wasn't, I couldn't just do one slide of a man sat on a building and that had conveyed the information that we needed to convey. But imagine I've done something like this, and then this is the next thing that pops up on the slide. Okay. Now, this is just a picture that I've taken from the Microsoft Architecture Center. And it's a diagram for a modern data warehouse for small and medium businesses, if anybody cares. But as soon as I throw that up on the screen, I bet some of you have started looking at the icons and trying to work out what are all the components, right? And some of you are looking at the top left corner and have maybe gone stream, velocity, IoT devices, IoT, I like smart buildings, and have spiraled off that way. Somebody else has gone to the Azure machine learning component. From there, they've leaped into Chat GPT, and now they're thinking about a funny picture that they saw that they'd created from text. And so this diagram, everybody is spiraling everywhere, and it's like my eyeballs have hit a wall when that gets put on the screen after those other types of slides. But yet, that information is really useful if we can give it over in a more consumable fashion. So perhaps what I might do is try and step down to that level of complexity, because we do need to get to that level of complexity sometimes. But I don't want to go from up here to down there. It's like hitting a wall. So I might step down to it. So maybe this would be an approach that I do, is I'd take something like that diagram and again, just do something really simple. So what I've done is use smart art in PowerPoint, nothing particularly clever, but I'd maybe change the narrative to something like this, to step down to the complexity and say, right, we're thinking about modern data warehouses. So whenever we think about this, this is the way we need to think about it. First of all, we need to think about our data and where are we getting our data from? And is that streaming in from devices, or is that coming from other existing databases? We need to think about where the data is coming from. Then we need to think about how we're going to load that data. We need to think about how we're going to ingest that data and take it from where it exists now to the platform where we want it to exist. And once we've got it there, we need to think about how we store it efficiently, how we store it cost effectively, and how we store it securely. So we need to think about how we store it. And then we need to think about, well, how do we now want to process that data? How do we want to manipulate that data so it's stored in a way that we can use it? And once we've done that, we need to let our data scientists loose on it to get business insight out of that data that's there. And then finally, we need to present it out to the end users in a way that they can consume it and use it for their business purposes. So let me step out of role again. So I've just tried to take the main flow of that, really complicated example, just pop it into smart art. So as it simplifies it, add a build-in so that I'm controlling the split brain problem. And then I think, right, well, now we need to get to the architectural diagram, because maybe that's a conversation that we do need to have. And so what I've done here is I've just cropped that one picture. So I downloaded the JPEG and I've just now cropped it into chunks and done 6 different slides and cropped the picture differently. So I've gone in, so first of all, we talk about this is the different data that we've got coming on. Now I could say, these are the components about how we load and ingest it. Now let's think about the components where we store it. Now let's think about how we're going to process and manipulate it. And those are the components we need to consider. Now we want to think about how we collaborate. And finally, we need to think about how we present it. So what I've done is I've taken, and this is really quick, right? Because what I could have done is I could have downloaded icon packs and I could have built all that myself, which I could have done. And sometimes we've got time and it's a big conference, or a really high value conversation. We want to do that. But sometimes it needs to be a bit quicker and dirtier. And so just grabbing the diagram, cropping it in PowerPoint and using a morph transition, and you can get that really nice build. So let me pause there. Sammy, can I come with any Q&A? And if we do Q&A, maybe on the split brain, if there's anything relevant to the split brain and the Oren stuff, we can come back to in a bit.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. How do you avoid wordy slide? Tell a good story if the audience is interested in the nitty-gritty details. Is that a good one?
Yeah. Great question. That is a great question. Well, I'm kind of hoping that maybe I've answered that a little bit with this complex diagrams part. There is a place to talk about the nitty gritty. Like loads of comms people will sort of say, well, don't talk about the nitty gritty, but we need to. We're in tech. This is the reality. It's a complex world we live in. So what I would say is you want to step down. You don't want to hit them right between the eyes. Okay. And can we use diagrams? You know, if we need to use lots of wordy text because, I don't know, we're putting quote on there, or it's some extracts of a log and then we want to highlight a line in the log, or, you know, what you want to do is if they do want to go into the nitty gritty, that's perfectly fine. And lots of decision makers need the nitty gritty to make informed decisions. And we shouldn't be scared of going there, but we need to think about how we do it, not just let's put everything up there and distract them from what the bit that they, you know, you think they really need to know.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. What is your take on demoing moving the screen whilst talking versus not moving the screen while talking?
Moving the screen whilst talking versus, I'm not sure if I know what that means. Moving the screen whilst talking versus not moving the screen whilst talking. So I guess if you're doing a demo, so the question is, do you say something and now you go in and you click and then you do the actions you want to do in silence and then you talk again? So I'm guessing that's what you mean. So to my mind, I would say it depends. Again, you want to think about the split brain problem. You know, sometimes if demos take a bit long, we might try and distract them by telling them another story whilst we're trying to do something. So I guess whatever you do it with intent. I think it's entirely fine to talk whilst you're clicking and whilst you're demoing, but tell it as a cohesive narrative. Not I'm talking about one thing whilst I'm doing another thing. So I don't think it matters whether you speak, do some stuff and pause, as long as it's a cohesive thing that you're doing.
All right. How do you get your sales team on board with this methodology when they have their golden deck that has all the wordy slides and that they're comfortable with that?
Oh, you know, so this is like change management, isn't it really? How do you get them to do it? So I'll tell you where my brain goes straight away, and that is to ADKAR. So if any of you have done change management, ProSci is the one I love, and ADKAR. So ADKAR is another mnemonic. It stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforce. So what I'd think about is, right, and you've got to do that in order. So first of all, I've got to make the people aware that there's a problem. So what is the problem? Is the problem that audiences are disengaged? You know, and disengaged audiences leads to, you know, less sales, lower relationships, losing competitive deals. So somehow there's making people aware of the problems that exist with their approach and the opportunity to, if they change it. So you've got to think about how you do that. So make them aware that there's a problem and what the opportunity is. Then you've got to create some kind of desire with them. Like, how are you going to get that? You know, they need to want to do it. It's like going on a weight loss diet, right? People might know they're overweight, but it's only when they can't play with their kids, or they have a heart attack, or they get diabetes, or, you know, something like that, that creates the desire for them to want to eat less and go to the gym more or whatever. So you've got to think about how you're going to create that desire. It's not enough to just be aware of a problem. Then you've got to give them some knowledge, like, you know, like this. Tell them this is a better way to do it. And if you do this, you're going to have better relationships with customers. You're going to engage them better. They're going to remember you, and that you're not going to lose that deal with the competition again. And then they need to go and do it. And then you just need to, through your, I guess, your leadership, keep reinforcing how important that is. Maybe giving awards, you know, some way, keep talking about it in one-to-ones so that you reinforce that behavior, that it's really important for them to do this.
All right. Do you have any suggestions on how to help the split brain when giving a demo instead of PowerPoints or diagrams?
Yeah. And I think it's going back to that question earlier on, you know, should you move and then point? And I tell you what I would do, you know, this is the way I would do my demos is, so let's imagining I had some demo about this data warehouse thing, right? I wanted to, I don't know, I'm going to build out something about Azure machine learning. I'm going to, you know, build something out in that bit. What I would do is I would tie my demo to a high level. So I would start off with my demo at a high level going, right, these are the things we're talking about. And, you know, here's my first bit of demo, let's say on data. I take them up to a high level. talk about what we're doing at a high level, make sure they're on board, they're following the thread. I then start to bring them down into maybe the architecture. So these are the components that we're going to be talking about. Then I'd maybe get into the demo, show them the demo, and then maybe reinforce and go back. So this is what we've done. So that's the way I would like to use the two together. The challenge with just doing a demo, in my mind, is that people can get lost in your clicks a little bit. And particularly if you've got a product that's a little bit clunky and you've got to do this in this screen, this in this screen, this in this screen, hop over to that screen, people have kind of lost the thread a little bit. Whereas if you can talk them through what's happening at a high level, drop into the demo and then drop back up, for me, that's a really effective way to do it.
All right. I mean, we have a couple more questions, but do you want to maybe do one more and keep going, or you want to keep going?
Let's keep going, and then we'll
Okay.
come back to the questions. Then we'll come back to the questions at the end.
Perfect.
So let's summarize. I've covered the main bits that I really wanted to cover with you. Here we go. So remember Freddie. We've got a real challenge in the tech sector, right? We need to be relevant to so many different audiences, and the number of decision makers that get involved in the buying cycle is only going up. So the important thing is to remember we need to be relevant. To the earlier question, we can't keep peddling that old golden slide deck full of words, because that might not be relevant to the HR director who's suddenly got a seat at the table, or some other part of the business that we've never considered. And we've been there selling to, let's say, IT directors for years. And now there's people that aren't from that world that are sat at the decision table. So we've got all of these different people that we need to be relevant to. And in the same way, we wouldn't read Freddy Krueger to a small child. We need to think how we change that up for the audiences that we now find ourselves speaking to. So it's really important we put that audience at the center and be relevant to that audience, that we build empathy with that audience and we give them value. And so we've thought about how we can become more influential, how we can become more memorable, and how we can become more successful. And I think those things are what a lot of people are really quite striving from, and I think this helps. And we thought about how you do that. We've thought about Oren, and this is, as I said earlier, the framework, the guiding light, the North Star that I use. And I iterate on it as I'm going through my creation process, my brainstorming process, my demo selection process, my slide development, what anecdotes I'm going to use. And I keep referring back to these and saying, is this anecdote I'm going to choose, does it help me with that key point that I want them to remember? Or is it just the funny story I've got? And if so, maybe I need another funny story that helps them remember this thing that I want them to remember. So we've got Oren there, which is a great way to think about how you create everything. And then we thought, from a visual storytelling perspective, we just need that cohesive narrative and visuals. And whether those visuals be a demo, or whether those visuals be a picture, or whether those visuals be a complex diagram that we've brought to life in a consumable way, we need to create that cohesive message that doesn't disengage our audience, but engages them and makes it memorable. So then the third thing I'd say, and this is what I spend all day doing. I'm working with organizations going through the technical storytelling program. So what I've shared with you today is just 2 lessons from the technical storytelling program. And what I spend my my life doing at the moment is a 10-week program where I work with pre-sales teams or consultancy teams or product group teams on a 10-week program to help them think about how they tell better stories. And I do that remotely over a period of time to really help change behaviors of people. And And then I get together face to face with people in person, and we practice it. You know, there's the old saying, you can't learn to ride a bike by watching YouTube. You need to get on and try it and find that balance point. And then what I also do with people is coaching. So if people have got big conferences coming up, really high value pitches that they want some help with, I help with that. And so that little QR code there, if that's something that you'd be interested in doing, stick that in, and that's got more information, and it's got a sample video lesson from the video lessons that I've got, and that's what I spend all my time doing. Other things, and this is a bit of a repeat from earlier, got a podcast, loads of great topics on there talking about this and storytelling, and we've got a comedian on there, we've got technical leaders on there, about really great interviews on there. Website if you want to have a look, and also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to hear about the challenges you've got, and I'd love to get connected. So there we go. That's everything I wanted to cover. Sammy, have we got any more questions that we need to go
We
through?
have a bunch, so we will try to get through as many as we can.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Can one person's asking if you could put that QR code up again? So I'm going to ask you that so that
which
they
one?
can.
Which I'll put that one. There was 3. So that is the one. Let me put that one up. That is for if you're interested in me working with your organization. That's a specific landing page that talks about me working with your organization. So I'll keep that one up for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3, and just ping me if you want to get it again. Or these are the QR codes for my general website, or that's the QR code for my LinkedIn. So got that one?
Awesome. Let's see. How long does it take to train a team with this methodology?
Right. Well, great question. So the program I've got, that's about 10 weeks plus a course. So probably sort of 3 months you're talking about. I mean, you could binge watch it all, but the thing is, and I'm going to go back to that change theory I talked about of ADKAR, people have got their own personal change journeys. And, I don't know if you're like me, you watch one thing and you forget it, or you go on a training course and it's brilliant, but then you forget it. Whereas if you try and do something over a 3-month period, it's that reinforced part. So you keep learning it, and then you keep doing it again, and you keep doing it again, and you get together every week, and it really helps change behavior. So I think doing that. The other bit is if you can do that practice, there is nothing better than applying this to, let's say, a sales pitch you've got, or a conference that you've got coming up, and making it real world. And then the other thing is, specific personal feedback really helps. So self-awareness. People might not be aware that they are speaking in a monotone voice. They might not be aware that they're doing some things, and so that feedback and that coaching really helps. So I would say it's not a hack. It's not a quick thing that you can do. Some people will pick this up. So I was working with one customer last month. Literally first week of lessons, this guy was like, this has changed my life, and I've got a pitch coming up this week and I'm changing it, and I want to do it like this. And then we get to the next week and he was like, why didn't you tell me this sooner? I did it all wrong. And so he was really, bringing it on and changing a lot. Some people, a lot more experience in presenting, actually, and it's just some tweaks that they need to make. And maybe that might even take them a little bit longer to be aware that there's a problem and a desire to change it. So I'd say it depends, but if you can do it over a prolonged period of time, that's where you'll see real behavioral change, as opposed to like, we gave them a video and everybody surveyed said they liked the video. It's better to try and drive change, which takes longer.
Awesome. Okay. What is your strategy for building segues from one slide to another?
Whoa. I don't know if I've got a strategy. So I'm going to use the good old fashioned answer of it depends. Sometimes I want the next slide to be part of a joke. That's the punchline of a joke. And maybe I used that right at the beginning, when I said, so whenever I think about technical storytelling, the first thing I think about is Freddy Krueger. So that was a bit of timing with a slide so that timing was maybe a bit more important, and maybe that translated on the Zoom delay or not. I don't know. So sometimes the timing's really important. Sometimes it's like a full stop. A slide is an end of a section. We've talked about hackers, and we're going to pause, and we're going to pause for a while, and we're going to let that soak in. And now we're going to start a new paragraph with this new visual that is an aid, not a distraction. Sometimes you just want to turn the slides off like I did. You just want to hit B for black, and all gone. And you don't want a visual aid because you just want to engage with the people there, and you don't want them distracted. So I don't think I've got a strategy. I think there's many different approaches you can take.
Awesome. Okay, how would you split your presentation if you have a mix of CRO and a senior engineer from their team to be able to influence them both?
Can you say that again, Sammy?
Yeah, how would you split your presentation if you have a mix of a CRO and a senior engineer from their team to be able to influence them both?
Okay. Now I'm going to make assumption. I'm going to make an assumption that acronym of CRO is Chief Revenue Officer. I'm not sure, but that's to answer that question. That's what I'm going to assume of that acronym. So yeah, and this is a common problem, a really common challenge. So there's the way I think about it is, firstly, do we want them in the same meeting? Sometimes maybe we don't, and so sometimes we can back off and go, actually, I'm going to have a meeting with the CRO where I'm going to talk about all the things that are relevant to that CRO. And now I'm going to have another meeting with the engineer, and I'm going to take all the time talking to that engineer, some of the how, the deep technical. So if you can separate it, can you? And is that the right thing to do? But often we can't, right? The customer scheduled the meeting, they've got the audience that they want. So I would always say the first thing is still try and understand the personas that are going to be in that meeting. So if we've got a CRO, let's spend some time thinking about what a CRO wants to hear. And then let's spend some time thinking about what an engineer wants to hear. And then you can think about, well, how are we going to approach it? And I think probably they would know that they care about different things. So it might be that we start off at a high level. And this is another one of the lessons from my course. I talk about a graphic equalizer of how much what we need, how much why we need, and how much how we need. And so we might be thinking CRO, we need a lot of what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. Probably the CRO cares a lot less about the how, whereas the engineer, lots about the how, because they want to know the detail. So then you can either say, right, I'm going to split this meeting in half. We're going to start off thinking about what it is we're trying to achieve and why. And then the second half, we're going to dip into the how. Mr. CRO or Mrs. CRO, more than happy for you to stay for the how part. Maybe they want to chip off. Maybe you want to do your email. I don't know. But you're kind of saying, look, I appreciate you've got different needs. You appreciate you've got different needs. I understand that. And therefore, I'm going to try and pitch it appropriately. The other way is to just go really generic. When we're going really generic, is that gives little value to everybody. The CRO gets little value. The engineer gets little value. So maybe it's worth a conversation with the customer, and ask them, how would they like to go through it?
Awesome. Okay, we're going to try and sneak one more question in here. What in your opinion is fundamentally different between selling to technical and non-technical people?
If I was going to say it like in a bite-sized chunk, it's the how. Technical people care about how. I did a podcast, and that podcast was with a former CEO. And that was exactly what he said to me. He was like, I don't care how you're going to do it. All I want to know is what you're going to do. And I want you to give me confidence that you know what you're doing. And that was really all the podcast was about him saying that. So it's worth going and having a listen. So for me, often the senior business leaders, what are you going to do and why are you going to do it? The technical people are thinking, how am I going to implement that and how am I going to execute that? So when you're talking to the business leaders, dial down the how, dial up the what and the why, and behave in a way that gives them confidence. When you're thinking about the technical person, a bit less of what and why, and a lot more on the how and the technical depth that you're going to go into. So that would just be, you know, my bite-sized kind of chunk on that.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're just at the top of the hour. I know we had a couple other questions in the Q&A box. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of them, guys, but we'll forward all the questions to Ben. But I do also encourage you to connect with Ben on LinkedIn. His QR code is right here, so you guys can connect with him and you can ask those questions that way as well. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank you, Ben, so much for lending us your time and your expertise. What an awesome session. Thank you, everyone who asked questions and connected with us in the Q&A box. We want to remind you all that we have DemoFest X, Dublin, London, and New York City coming up later in the year. We hope you will join us there. Maybe we'll get a guest appearance from Ben at one of those events as well. We'll see you guys all soon. Thank you guys so much.
See ya. Bye.